It was a cold evening on November 14th, 1997, when the Harrington family, James, his wife Claire, their teenage daughter Emily, and 8-year-old son Michael, entered Penn Station, New York, preparing to board a late-night train to Boston. Witnesses recalled them carrying just 2 suitcases and moving with unusual urgency, as if they were running away from something. At 9:46 p.m., the family was last seen near Platform 12, waiting for their train. Surveillance footage showed them standing together, huddled closely. Then, in a matter of seconds, they vanished from the frame. The train departed, but the Harrington family never boarded. They were simply gone. Authorities launched a massive search. Initially, police suspected a family dispute or voluntary disappearance. But things shifted when FBI agents uncovered strange evidence inside the station's maintenance tunnels. Discarded clothing, a half-burned ticket stub with James Harrington's name, and cryptic chalk markings on the walls resembling ritual symbols. Rumors spread quickly. Some believed the family was kidnapped by an underground cult. Others suggested human trafficking, while a few whispered about a government cover-up. Then came the chilling detail. Workers reported hearing children's screams echoing in the abandoned lower tunnels days after the family went missing. The FBI soon revealed that Penn Station had sealed off sublevels from the early 1900s, forgotten chambers no longer on official maps. When investigators forced their way in, they found personal belongings from multiple missing persons cases spanning 2 decades. Purses, children's toys, wallets, and clothing. Most shocking of all, they discovered a hidden chamber filled with hundreds of photographs of commuters, pinned to the walls like a gallery of prey. The Harringtons were never found. Their disappearance became one of New York's darkest unsolved mysteries. To this day, many believe Penn Station hides more secrets beneath its bustling floors, and that the FBI has never revealed the full truth of what they found. Introduction with Hook. It was a cold, restless night in New York City, November 1997. The streets outside Penn Station buzzed with the usual chaos. Honking taxis, rushing commuters, the shuffle of luggage wheels on wet pavement. Among the thousands passing through that terminal was a family of 4. James Harrington, his wife Claire, their teenage daughter Emily, and 8-year-old son Michael. To every bystander, they looked like just another family headed for a routine trip. But history would remember them very differently. The Harringtons were seen walking into the station around 9:30 p.m., their 2 modest suitcases in hand. James, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 40s, seemed unusually tense, glancing over his shoulder more than once. Claire clutched little Michael's hand tightly, while Emily walked silently beside them, her eyes lowered as if she too sensed something unsettling. Though surrounded by strangers, there was an air of secrecy clinging to them, as though they carried with them a burden unseen by others. Witnesses later told investigators that the family appeared to be in a rush, not the calm, steady walk of travelers boarding a late-night train. They moved quickly through the crowded hall, weaving past commuters as if trying to escape from someone or something. And yet, there was no visible pursuer, no argument, no obvious reason for the tension written across James's face. To this day, those small details are remembered by the few who happened to glance at them that night. At exactly 9:46 p.m., the Harringtons arrived at Platform 12, where the Boston-bound train would soon depart. Surveillance footage confirmed their presence, showing the family huddled together near a pillar. They didn't speak to anyone. They didn't buy snacks, read newspapers, or chat casually the way travelers often do. They just stood there, together, silent, almost as if they were waiting for something other than the train itself. And then, without warning, the inexplicable occurred. In the grainy black and white footage, the family stood clearly in frame, and in the very next recording, just seconds later, they were gone. Vanished. Not walking away, not boarding the train, not even drifting out of view. They simply disappeared from the footage as though swallowed by the station itself. The disappearance baffled both investigators and the public. A family of 4 doesn't just vanish into thin air, especially in one of the busiest stations in America under constant surveillance. Yet, when police combed through hours of additional security tapes, There was no sign of them leaving through exits, boarding a train, or entering restrooms. It was as though the Harringtons had dissolved into the air between one frame and the next. For days, the media flooded the city with headlines. Family vanishes inside Penn Station. Harrington mystery deepens. Did they ever leave Platform 12? The public was gripped with terror and curiosity. How could a family simply vanish in front of cameras? Parents held their children tighter in crowded stations. Commuters glanced nervously over their shoulders, and whispers spread that something unnatural lingered beneath New York's busiest hub. James Harrington's co-workers described him as a man with no enemies, a man who lived an ordinary, uneventful life. Claire was a homemaker, devoted to her children. Emily and Michael were bright, well-loved students. There was no criminal record, no debts, no connections to anything remotely suspicious. On paper, they were the last family anyone would expect to vanish into a mystery that would haunt investigators for decades. What made the case even stranger was the timing. In 1997, Penn Station was already infamous for its hidden corners and forgotten sublevels. Rumors swirled about tunnels long closed to the public, where shadows lingered and echoes carried strange noises at night. Some said the Harringtons stumbled onto something they were never meant to see. Others whispered that they had been deliberately silenced, pulled into the darkness by unseen hands. The FBI, pulled into the investigation almost immediately, would later describe what they found inside those sealed-off areas of the station as disturbing beyond imagination. But in those first hours, when the family's faces appeared on missing posters plastered across New York, no one yet knew the truth. All that was certain was this. On that cold November night, a family walked into Penn Station, and from that moment forward, no one ever saw them again, setting the scene. The Harringtons' trip to Boston wasn't supposed to be remarkable. According to relatives, James had mentioned a short visit to a business associate, though he never explained the details. Claire told a close friend she was looking forward to a fresh start once they returned. Emily had her backpack stuffed with sketchbooks and pencils, while little Michael carried a toy car he refused to put down. On the surface, it was the picture of an ordinary family outing, yet something about the way they carried themselves that night didn't feel ordinary at all. James walked ahead, keeping his eyes fixed forward as though guiding his family through hostile territory instead of a train station. Claire's grip on her children was unusually firm, and Emily, normally a spirited teenager, kept quiet and close. Witnesses would later say the family looked like they were in hiding, avoiding conversation, avoiding stares, as if blending into the crowd was the only thing that mattered. The station itself that night added to the atmosphere. The air was damp with the chill of November, and the vast arched ceilings echoed with announcements and footsteps. Neon signs flickered above fast food counters, and the floor was slick with tracked-in rain. Travelers bustled about with a mix of weariness and urgency, but the Harringtons stood out, not because of what they wore, but because of their silence. Most families traveling through Penn Station carried an air of fatigue or casual chatter, parents checking schedules, children whining, couples quarreling softly. The Harringtons had none of that. No small talk, no laughter, no sibling arguments. Instead, their eyes darted, their lips pressed tightly shut. They moved like people who didn't want to be noticed, which ironically made them more noticeable. When they reached the main concourse, James paused briefly under the massive departure board. The glowing letters flipped with rapid clacks as train time shifted. He studied it for only a second before ushering his family quickly down toward Platform 12. Security footage captured this moment clearly. James glancing upward, then glancing behind him, before tightening his jaw and pressing forward. What struck investigators later was how little luggage the family carried. 2 suitcases for 4 people, 1 backpack, and Michael's toy car. That was all. No coats or extras for a long stay. No signs of preparation for a lengthy trip. It suggested either haste or a destination closer than claimed. For the FBI, this detail would become one of many oddities hinting that the Harringtons weren't simply taking a casual family journey. Claire's expression in the footage was especially haunting. In freeze frames, her eyes appeared wide, almost frightened, though she never broke her stride. Some who saw her that night swore she looked like a woman already saying goodbye to the world around her. Whether it was exhaustion, fear, or knowledge of something unspeakable, no one could say for certain. Emily, just 16, clutched her sketchbook close to her chest as though protecting it. One bystander later recalled seeing her glance repeatedly at the floor tiles, almost refusing to look up at the bustling crowd. Michael, the youngest, clung to his toy car with both hands, occasionally tugging at his mother's arm, but he too never let go of her side. The image of these children walking silently into a mystery they could never escape remains one of the most chilling aspects of the case. The family's pace through the terminal grew quicker the closer they got to their platform. James didn't stop for tickets at the counter. He had already purchased them earlier that day, but he never interacted with any staff or strangers. He avoided eye contact with police officers patrolling the station, even when they passed directly in front of him. It was as if he feared recognition or worse, pursuit. By the time they reached the staircase leading down to platform 12, the tension around them seemed almost tangible. A few commuters noticed, though they paid little attention in the moment. To most, it was just another family in a hurry. But for those who looked closely, the Harringtons appeared less like passengers heading for a train and more like fugitives racing against an invisible clock. And from that descent toward the platform, their fate would remain one of New York's darkest enigmas, the vanishing on Platform 12. Platform 12 was unusually quiet for a Friday night. The Boston-bound train was delayed by a few minutes, and only a handful of passengers stood scattered along the edge. The Harrington family joined them, keeping close together, their backs almost brushing the steel beams that supported the station's ceiling. The surveillance camera above captured every movement, though what it recorded would later leave investigators speechless. James positioned himself slightly in front of his wife and children, as though shielding them from whatever might come. Claire held Michael tightly, her knuckles white against his small wrist, while Emily hovered silently between them, her face pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. They looked less like a family waiting for a train and more like people standing on trial, waiting for a verdict only they understood. The train's headlights flickered faintly down the dark tunnel, signaling its approach, yet the family never prepared to board. They didn't shuffle their luggage closer to the tracks. They didn't step forward like the others. They just remained still, their eyes darting nervously at the shadows that pooled in the far corners of the platform. At 9:46 p.m., the camera recorded them as clear as day. 4 figures standing together in a tight cluster, their outlines distinct against the tile walls. A single second later, when the camera cut to its next frame, they were gone. Vanished. No motion blur, no slow departure, no visible exit. One frame, present. The next frame, empty. Investigators replayed that footage thousands of times. They expected to find some technical glitch, a camera malfunction, or at the very least, a missed angle. But the tape was flawless. Every other passenger on the platform appeared continuously on screen, their movements smooth, uninterrupted. Only the Harrington family flickered out of existence, leaving behind nothing but a gap in reality. Witnesses on the platform confirmed the strangeness. A woman waiting for the same train told police she looked away only for a moment, just to check the arrival board. And when she turned back, the family she had seen a second earlier was gone. A man standing near the benches swore he heard a strange rush of air, like a sudden pressure drop, and then realized the family wasn't there anymore. The luggage, too, was gone. Not a suitcase, not a jacket, not even Michael's toy car remained behind. It was as though the Harringtons had carried nothing at all, or as though whatever force had taken them claimed their belongings in the same instant. This detail would disturb investigators deeply, because it meant they weren't dealing with a simple runaway case or even an abduction. It was something far more baffling. When officers rushed down to the platform minutes later, they found everything perfectly in order. The train pulled in, passengers boarded, and life went on as though nothing unusual had happened. The only thing missing was the Harrington family, whose names were already printed on that night's ticket manifest. The conductor confirmed they never boarded, and yet no one saw them leave. The FBI later reviewed additional cameras across the station, hoping to catch a glimpse of the family walking away. But there was nothing. No image of them entering a restroom, climbing stairs, or heading toward another platform. Every path they might have taken was covered by surveillance, and none showed their presence after that moment on Platform 12. To this day, experts debate what truly happened in those seconds of lost time. Some insist it was human interference, a well-coordinated abduction. Others point to the inexplicable absence of physical evidence, suggesting something far stranger. All that remains undeniable is this. At the very heart of New York's busiest station, under the glow of cold fluorescent lights, a family stood waiting for a train. And then they were gone, leaving nothing behind but silence. Initial theories. When word first broke that the Harrington family had disappeared inside Penn Station, the police were hesitant to call it foul play. In those first hours, the working theory was simple, a family dispute. Perhaps James had decided to take his family away without informing relatives, or Claire had convinced her husband to make a sudden move. After all, people vanished voluntarily all the time, fleeing debts, marriages, or troubled pasts. The problem was that the Harringtons didn't fit that narrative. Friends described them as stable, responsible, and deeply rooted in their community. Neighbors recalled James mowing the lawn every weekend, Claire hosting small gatherings, Emily preparing for art school, and Michael playing in the yard with local kids. They had no debts, no reported conflicts, and no signs of distress. Yet the theory of a runaway still clung to the early investigation like a safety net, because the alternative was unthinkable. The second theory came from the footage itself. Some investigators suggested the disappearance was the result of a camera glitch. Maybe the family had simply walked off screen between frames, lost in a blind spot. The trouble with that explanation was obvious. Other passengers moved smoothly across the footage without vanishing, and no blind spots were found near the Harringtons' position. The footage was seamless, except for the moment when the family disappeared. A more troubling theory emerged from whispers in the station: kidnapping. Could a highly organized group have targeted the family? The fact that their luggage vanished, too, suggested precision, almost like someone had orchestrated a clean sweep. Yet investigators struggled with the logistics. How could kidnappers remove 4 people from a well-lit platform under surveillance, without a single witness seeing them being dragged or led away? Some speculated that James himself was the orchestrator. Perhaps he had debts or secrets no one knew about. The burned ticket stub found later in the tunnels only added fuel to this suspicion, hinting he may have staged the disappearance to escape something. But those who knew him best dismissed the idea quickly. James was not a man of deception, and his family's devotion to him was unquestionable. The media, hungry for answers, introduced wilder possibilities. Tabloids ran headlines like "Family Erased by Underground Cult" and "Mystery Tunnels of Penn Station. Are they haunted?" These theories were dismissed by law enforcement at first, but as the days dragged on with no answers, even hardened investigators found themselves uneasy. The bizarre symbols later found in the tunnels didn't help silence the rumors. Other voices argued for a government connection. In the late 1990s, whispers of secret experiments and hidden surveillance operations circulated heavily in conspiracy circles. Could the Harringtons have stumbled into something they weren't supposed to see? The sealed-off chambers beneath Penn Station, rumored but long ignored, suddenly became the center of these speculations. Families of other missing persons began stepping forward. People who had lost loved ones in 1980s and early 90s claimed similarities: unexplained disappearances near transit hubs, unexplained evidence, unanswered questions. Their testimonies pushed investigators to consider that the Harrington case wasn't an isolated tragedy, but part of something much larger and more sinister. Meanwhile, ordinary commuters added to the noise. Some swore they heard children screaming in the tunnels days after the family vanished. Others reported seeing strange figures in restricted areas of the station at odd hours of the night. Each new account blurred the line between reality and rumor, between crime investigation and urban legend. In the chaos of these competing theories, one fact remained undeniable. A family of 4 had vanished from one of the busiest transit hubs in America without a trace. And though authorities scrambled to explain it with runaways, glitches, or kidnappings, none of those theories could account for the most haunting detail of all: the silence left behind where a family once stood, the chilling discovery. Days after the Harrington family's disappearance, the search expanded beyond ticket counters, waiting rooms, and train logs. Investigators began probing the less visible parts of Penn Station, the maintenance corridors, utility shafts, and service tunnels that most passengers never knew existed. These were damp, claustrophobic spaces where peeling paint clung to the walls and the hum of pipes created an unsettling echo. It was in these forgotten corners that the first disturbing clues would surface. Deep in a narrow passage behind Platform 12, officers found something odd: a half-burned ticket stub. The name printed on it was unmistakable: James Harrington. The stub was charred around the edges, as if deliberately set on fire but quickly extinguished. Why would a train ticket, meant to carry a family out of New York, end up smoldering in a maintenance shaft? And who had placed it there? Nearby, investigators discovered a child's mitten, soaked from the dripping ceiling above. Though no one could confirm it belonged to little Michael Harrington, the sight of the tiny glove abandoned in such a grim place sent shivers through the search team. It suggested the family, or at least the children, might have been dragged down here. But if so, why had no one seen them leave the platform? The deeper they pushed, the more unsettling the evidence became. In a narrow alcove, a bundle of fabric was found: ripped clothing, frayed at the seams, stained with something too dark to be dust. Tests later confirmed the stains were human blood, though there was never enough to prove it belonged to any of the Harringtons. Still, the discovery hinted at violence in a place where no one should have been. Perhaps most unnerving were the symbols: chalk markings, spirals, intersecting lines, and crude figures were scrawled across the walls of the tunnel. At first, investigators dismissed them as graffiti, but experts later noted the patterns repeated, drawn with deliberate care rather than reckless vandalism. Some symbols resembled ancient runes, while others looked eerily like ritual markings. Their presence under a major train station raised more questions than answers. Adding to the unease were reports from maintenance workers. Several claimed they had long avoided these tunnels, describing strange sounds that echoed in the dark: low voices, metallic clattering, even muffled cries. Most had laughed it off as superstition, the kind of ghost stories workers tell to pass long shifts underground. But now, in the wake of the family's disappearance, those stories no longer felt like jokes. The FBI team documented everything, their flashlights cutting through the dust and shadows. They photographed the burned ticket, bagged the mitten, collected fibers from the torn clothes. Yet, as evidence piled up, so did contradictions. None of these findings explained how the Harringtons had vanished so cleanly, without being seen exiting the platform. It was as though the station itself had swallowed them. When the photographs of the chalk symbols were leaked to the press, panic spread quickly. Tabloids speculated about secret societies operating beneath Penn Station, performing rituals in hidden chambers. Conspiracy theorists claimed the family had been offered to something that lurked in the tunnels. Officials tried to dismiss these rumors, but the discovery of the symbols made denial difficult. Even seasoned investigators admitted unease. One officer described feeling watched as he moved through the tunnels, as if eyes lingered just beyond the flashlight's reach. Another swore he heard a child's laugh echo faintly. Even seasoned investigators admitted unease. One officer described feeling watched as he moved through the tunnels, as if eyes lingered just beyond the flashlight's reach. Another swore he heard a child's laugh echo faintly through the pipes, only for the sound to stop the instant he froze to listen. While unofficial, were whispered among agents long after the case went cold. The chilling discoveries in the tunnels shifted the Harrington case from a missing persons investigation to something far darker. No longer could authorities cling to the theory of a runaway family or a camera glitch. Something had happened beneath Penn Station. Something violent, ritualistic, and deeply unsettling. Yet even with these pieces of evidence, the larger picture remained maddeningly unclear, leaving investigators to wonder if they had only brushed against the edges of a secret much bigger than one family's disappearance. The whispers and rumors. The moment news of the burned ticket, the mitten, and the strange chalk symbols leaked, whispers began to swirl through New York like wildfire. Commuters who once treated Penn Station as routine now spoke in hushed tones, their voices laced with unease. Rumors grew louder with each passing day, until the Harrington case was no longer just a police investigation. It was a story of dread retold in every diner, bar, and late-night news broadcast across the city. One rumor claimed the family had stumbled upon a secret society operating beneath the station, a hidden cult that preyed on unlucky travelers. The symbols, some argued, were proof of rituals carried out in the darkness of forgotten tunnels. Fear grew that the Harringtons had been taken, as part of some offering, their disappearance deliberately concealed under the chaos of a busy transit hub. Others insisted it was organized crime, pointing to whispers of human trafficking rings that allegedly used New York's underground passages to move people unseen. The sudden vanishing of the family, with luggage and children in tow, was painted as a perfectly executed abduction, carried out by professionals who knew how to avoid cameras and witnesses. Yet skeptics asked, if it were a crime, why leave behind ritualistic symbols that only invited attention? The media, sensing the public's fascination, fueled the fire. Tabloids screamed headlines like "Family Sacrifice Beneath Penn Station" and "Screams in the Tunnels." Who's next? Nightly talk shows invited so-called experts to speculate about cult activity, supernatural forces, or government conspiracies. The Harringtons' smiling family photo, plastered across every front page, became the face of a growing urban legend. Commuters themselves added to the hysteria. People waiting for trains swore they heard echoes of children crying in the tunnels at night. Maintenance workers whispered about shadowy figures slipping between sealed doors, their shapes indistinct but undeniably human. Some even claimed to have glimpsed a man in a long coat watching from the far end of a dark corridor, only for him to vanish when approached. Among the wildest theories was the idea that the family had been erased by the government. Conspiracy forums exploded with speculation that the Harringtons had accidentally witnessed something classified, perhaps a secret transport or covert operation, and were silenced to keep them from talking. The FBI's unusually tight-lipped stance only fueled this theory, as agents refused to answer reporters' questions about the tunnel discoveries. But rumors didn't stop at crime or conspiracy. They veered into the paranormal. Some began to whisper that Penn Station itself was cursed, built over land riddled with tragedies. Stories of time slips circulated, claiming the Harringtons hadn't been kidnapped at all, but had simply stepped into another dimension, lost forever between one moment and the next. Taxi drivers, bartenders, and night shift workers spread tales of phantom trains said to rumble through the lowest levels of the station, trains no schedule ever listed. According to these accounts, the Harringtons might have boarded something that wasn't meant for the living, vanishing into tunnels that had no exit. The whispers became so widespread that even ordinary people began to alter their behavior. Some avoided Platform 12 altogether, claiming it felt wrong. Others refused to take late-night trains, fearing that darkness made it easier for the station's secrets to claim more victims. Parents clutched their children tighter, haunted by the thought that the Harringtons had simply been ordinary, just like them, until they weren't. Within weeks, the Harrington disappearance had transformed from a police case into a full-blown legend, its details twisted and multiplied by rumor. Each retelling grew darker, more chilling, until the line between fact and fiction blurred completely. Yet beneath all the speculation, one truth lingered. Nobody could explain how a family of 4 had vanished in the heart of New York City, or what the haunting clues left in the tunnels really meant. The sealed sublevels. As the official search dragged on, investigators grew frustrated by the lack of progress. The Harringtons had not boarded any train, had not exited through any gate, and had not appeared on a single additional camera. It was then that an older maintenance supervisor quietly mentioned something few outside the station staff knew. Penn Station still had sealed sublevels, forgotten chambers left behind from earlier construction phases. According to him, some of these sublevels have been locked up since the 1930s, when major renovations buried old tracks and service areas under layers of new steel and concrete. They weren't on official maps anymore, and few even remember their existence. But if the Harringtons had vanished inside Penn Station, investigators realized perhaps the answer lay below, where the public never walked. FBI agents, armed with flashlights and crowbars, pried open rusted doors hidden behind supply closets and utility panels. What greeted them was unsettling. Stairwells leading into darkness, heavy with the smell of mildew and iron. Dust hung in the air like a curtain, disturbed only by the echo of boots on concrete. The deeper they went, the less it felt like a train station, and the more it felt like descending into another world. The first chambers were narrow, lined with crumbling brick walls. Old signage still clung to the surfaces, arrows pointing to tracks that no longer existed, faded timetables from an era long gone. Graffiti from decades past marked some corners, while other walls bore strange markings eerily similar to the chalk symbols found near Platform 12. As they pushed further in, the investigators encountered doors welded shut, as if someone had deliberately sealed them. Behind one such door, when cut open, lay a vast open hall filled with broken benches, rusted rails, and decaying wooden beams. The air was unnaturally cold, and the silence oppressive, broken only by the distant sound of dripping water echoing endlessly in the chamber. It was here that they began finding personal belongings. A woman's handbag, its contents rotted, a child's toy, wheels broken and caked in dust, a stack of old wallets scattered across the floor. None belonged to the Harringtons, but all had the same eerie quality, as though their owners had been swallowed by the station and never returned to reclaim them. What unsettled the team most was the sheer scale of these hidden levels. Corridor after corridor branched off, some leading to collapsed staircases, others to heavy steel doors that resisted every attempt to open them. It became clear that entire sections of the station lay buried beneath the bustling platforms above, preserved like catacombs beneath modern New York. The further they went, the stranger it became. Some walls bore clusters of photographs, tattered and water-damaged, pinned in rows as if arranged deliberately. Faces stared back at the investigators, commuters, families, children. Most were unidentifiable due to age and damage. But the implication was chilling. Someone had been watching, collecting, keeping track of ordinary people who passed through Penn Station. The sense of dread grew heavier with every chamber explored. Agents reported feeling watched, though their radios often failed the deeper they went, leaving them isolated in the gloom. One officer described the sensation as being inside something alive, as if the station itself was breathing around them. The thought that the Harringtons might have been led, or forced, into these depths became impossible to ignore. By the time the FBI sealed off their search for the night, they had uncovered enough to prove one thing. Penn Station was not just a transit hub. Beneath its polished platforms and bustling crowds lay a maze of forgotten passageways, filled with traces of lives lost to time. And though investigators now knew the Harringtons could have vanished down here, the true scope of what lurked in those sealed sublevels was only beginning to reveal itself, the hidden chamber. It was in the farthest corner of the sealed sublevels that investigators stumbled upon a door unlike the others. Unlike the welded steel barriers and rotted wooden frames they had encountered before, this one was made of heavy iron, its hinges rusted but intact. The door appeared to have been untouched for decades, though the dust on the floor leading up to it seemed oddly disturbed, as if someone, or something, had passed through more recently. Forcing the door open required hours of work. When at last it groaned inward, a wave of cold, stagnant air rolled out, carrying with it a smell that made the agents recoil. Mildew, rust, and something faintly metallic that no one dared identify. Their flashlights cut into the darkness, illuminating a vast, low-ceilinged chamber that stretched further than the beams could reach. At first, the room appeared empty, just another abandoned hall buried beneath the station. But as their lights moved across the walls, the investigators froze. The surfaces were covered, lined from floor to ceiling, with photographs. Hundreds of them. Some were recent, others decades old, but all depicted the same thing. Commuters, travelers, and families captured in candid moments, unaware they were being watched. The photos were pinned haphazardly with rusted tacks, their edges curling from dampness. Some were black and white, showing people in clothing from the 1950s and 60s, while others were modern, faces that might have walked the station just days earlier. None were posed. They looked like surveillance shots, taken without consent. And among them, investigators recognized several images of the Harrington family, photos that had never been released publicly. On the floor beneath the photographs lay piles of personal belongings. Suitcases half opened, children's toys cracked with age, wallets stripped of identification but left with coins and scraps of paper. Each item looked as though it had once been cherished, carried with care, only to end up discarded in this hidden gallery of the lost. The deeper they searched the chamber, the more disturbing the discoveries became. In one corner stood a rusted metal cot, its mattress stained and rotting. Nearby, they found ropes frayed but still tied in knots. To some investigators, it looked like evidence of confinement, a place where people might have been kept against their will before vanishing for good. Carved into the concrete floor were more symbols, intricate, deliberate markings that matched those found near Platform 12. Some appeared freshly etched, the grooves sharp and clean despite the chamber's age. The implications were terrifying. Someone had been here not long ago, maintaining this place, adding to its horrors. One agent described the silence inside the chamber as unbearable. It wasn't just quiet. It was suffocating, heavy, as though the walls themselves held the echoes of countless voices that had once passed through. He later confessed that while standing in the room, he felt certain he wasn't alone, even though his team stood right beside him. The photographs on the far wall drew particular attention. They weren't random, but arranged in clusters, grouped by families, much like the Harringtons. Each grouping seemed to represent a unit: parents, children, siblings, suggesting whoever collected these images wasn't just observing individuals, but targeting entire families. How many had gone missing without anyone ever connecting the dots? The discovery of the chamber marked a turning point in the investigation. It was no longer a question of whether the Harringtons had vanished into Penn Station. It was a matter of who else had disappeared before them, and why their faces were now staring back from these water-stained walls. The hidden chamber told a story too dark to ignore, but one that remained maddeningly incomplete, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. Unanswered questions. Despite weeks of investigation, the FBI found themselves drowning in contradictions. Every lead uncovered inside the hidden chamber seemed to open another hole in the case rather than close one. Who had been taking those photographs? And how could so many people have gone missing in one of the busiest stations in the world without drawing immediate suspicion? The presence of the Harringtons' photos especially unsettled investigators. They were dated just days before the family vanished, yet no evidence suggested anyone had been following them prior to their trip. If someone had been watching, why weren't neighbors, co-workers, or even relatives aware of it? The personal belongings scattered in the chamber only deepened the mystery. None matched missing persons reports filed in the 1990s, which led some agents to speculate that many of the people represented there might never have been reported missing at all. Could it be that entire families had vanished over the decades, unnoticed, swallowed by the anonymity of a massive city? The strange symbols carved into the walls and floors raised even darker possibilities. Some experts consulted by the FBI claimed they resembled coded markings used by secret societies, while others insisted they were nothing more than construction notations. But if they were meaningless, why did they appear freshly etched in areas untouched for decades? Witness interviews only added confusion. A handful of longtime station workers admitted to hearing strange noises from beneath the platforms over the years, distant cries, dragging sounds, or echoes of footsteps where none should be. Yet when asked why they never reported these sounds, the workers all responded the same way. No one would have believed them. The FBI's own internal reports contain contradictions. Surveillance tapes that once showed static or malfunctioning playback now appear to be tampered with. Frames missing, feeds cutting to black precisely when the Harringtons walked into frame. Technical experts couldn't agree if this was coincidence, degradation of old equipment, or deliberate sabotage. Even the timeline refused to make sense. The Harringtons entered the station at 6:47 p.m. Witnesses saw them buy tickets. The cameras caught them moving toward platform 12. But from that point forward, every trace ended as if the family had stepped into a void. If they had been forced below ground, why didn't anyone see it happen in such a crowded space? The photographs in the chamber remain perhaps the most haunting evidence. The fact that some dated back decades suggested this was not an isolated incident, but a repeating pattern, one stretching across generations. Were these disappearances connected? Or had someone curated the photographs as part of a grotesque collection, with no explanation for how they were taken? The case files swelled with theories: human trafficking, cult activity, derelict workers living in forgotten tunnels, even speculation of secret government experiments. Each idea seemed plausible in fragments, but none explained everything. There was always one detail left hanging, one inconsistency that refused to fit. By the end of that year, the Harrington case became less about finding the missing family and more about confronting the possibility that Penn Station held secrets the public was never meant to see. And yet, for every discovery, 100 questions remained unanswered, leaving the investigators and the country trapped in a cycle of dread and speculation. Lingering shadows. Months after the investigation, the public's fascination with the Harringtons' disappearance only intensified. Newspapers ran sensational headlines, talk shows debated theories nightly, and amateur sleuths began flocking to Penn Station, hoping to uncover what the FBI could not. The station, once seen as a gateway of opportunity, now carried an aura of unease. Commuters began reporting strange encounters in the weeks that followed. Some claimed to see flickers of movement out of the corner of their eyes near platform 12. Others swore they heard the sound of children's laughter echoing faintly through the underground corridors, only to find the platforms deserted. These stories, dismissed by officials, spread quickly through rumor. Station workers, too, seemed changed by what had been uncovered. Veterans who had worked there for decades avoided certain corridors, claiming the atmosphere had grown heavier since the chamber was revealed. A few even refused to take overnight shifts, saying they felt watched whenever they passed near the sealed doors. Security measures were increased, with surveillance cameras added and patrols doubled. Yet even with the added presence, unexplained malfunctions continued. Cameras near platform 12 still cut out unpredictably, while motion sensors triggered alarms and sealed off areas where no one was present. The unexplained technical failures fed whispers that the station itself was resisting exposure. The photographs recovered from the hidden chamber were sealed in evidence, but their contents slowly leaked into the public domain. Grainy scans circulated in underground forums, where people claimed to recognize relatives or friends long thought to have disappeared elsewhere. These rumors only fueled the theory that Penn Station shadows extended far beyond New York. Some investigators could not move on. Even after being reassigned, they reported nightmares of the chamber, its walls of faces staring endlessly back at them. One agent confessed privately that he sometimes felt he was being followed on his way home, though he never saw anyone. To him, it was as though the chamber's presence had clung to him like a shadow. Writers, filmmakers, and conspiracy theorists began weaving the Harrington story into urban legends, painting Penn Station as a modern labyrinth designed not just for trains, but for something darker. To the public, the station became more than a building. It became a symbol of everything hidden beneath the surface of ordinary life. Yet behind the sensationalism, The official record remained stark. No bodies, no clear perpetrators, no answers. The Harringtons' disappearance remained unsolved, their names etched into the long list of missing persons. For the families who still came to Penn Station hoping for closure, the lack of resolution was worse than any explanation. And still, commuters kept passing through daily, unaware of what lay sealed beneath their feet. The sublevels remained closed, the chamber locked away, but the fear never dissipated. Whispers of the Harringtons' last moments lingered in the air, woven into the routine bustle of the station. Penn Station carried on, its trains rushing in and out, its crowds moving as they always had. But beneath the lights, beneath the polished floors, the shadows waited. The chamber remained, the photographs remained, and the questions remained. Silent reminders that some mysteries were never meant to be uncovered, yet refused to be forgotten.